Hello, my name is Paula Dominguez, and today I will be sharing with you about the community that was previously known as Little Mexico, located in Dallas, Texas. So, the community of Little Mexico is known as being one of Dallas's earliest Mexican barrios. Sol Villasana, author of Dallas's Little Mexico, characterizes this area as being the place where Mexicans have been a part of Dallas since its beginning. So the start of Little Mexico begins with and ends with the Mexican Revolution, which began in 1910. Through this positive change for the country of Mexico, we do see a social displacement of many Mexican families that migrate to Texas during all of this wartime. And they end up settling in the community of Little Mexico, which is then strengthened and is seen as one of North Texas's largest Mexican communities at the time. So the barrio of Little Mexico contained several industrial use properties that included junkyards, a city dump, and various packaging plants. So through all of these businesses, there is a demand for work and a demand for people to be close to the jobs that they have occupied. And so it just leads to the beginning and the prosperity of this community. Little Mexico was a community that experienced a lot of growth in a lot of the areas that made up the structure of the neighborhood. But one of the most long-lasting legacies of the barrio, known as Little Mexico, was the entrepreneurship within the area. Family-owned businesses began to rise up in the area, like bakeries combined with food stores, that were seemingly on every corner of the neighborhood. Tortilla factories were prominent businesses and really took economic flight when the businesses began to see success and notoriety outside of the barrio. Beauty shops, taverns, funeral homes, and even the ubiquitous insurance salesmen were soon plying their trades all over Little Mexico. Unfortunately, most family-owned businesses only saw longevity of life for 1 to 2 generations of economic success, but the industry that saw the most life was the food industry that saw the transformation of the family shop in the corporate age. Various small family cafes were able to be multiplied into official corporate chains. Despite the short lifespan of the smaller-owned businesses, they surely provided the foundation for the next generation's improved sense of education and lifestyle. The work and sacrifice of the previous generation was never destined to be in vain. Their determination not only provided a foundation for the next generation, but they also can be credited as providing the perseverance needed for the community to rise to present-day prominence as today's Mexican-American community in Dallas. Surely the community would not exist if it were not for the first generation of entrepreneurial success of Little Mexico. The beginning of the end of the community of Little Mexico began with the beginning of World War II. The paving and widening of the streets, the growth and expansion of Love Field Airport as a national airport, and urban revitalization caused by the Depression era all produced physical alterations to the face of Little Mexico. The war not only changed the physical shape of the barrio, but it also brought change to the residential composition of the neighborhood through young men leaving for the war. Their departure meant that they left behind aging parents and a weakened and cracking economic structure in Little Mexico. Our economy saw growth in job opportunities, but none of the potential forms of employment existed within the barrio, which made the proposition of moving away from Little Mexico more attractive for the younger generation. An inspiring fact from this era is that hundreds of Mexican-American residents from the barrio of Little Mexico served their adopted country in the war, despite many of the residents not even being citizens of the country they fought for. Because of the positive outcome of the war through Paris's and the Philippines' liberation, the returning residents were seen as Americans because of the duty that they had upheld during this depressive time. The organization of new groups such as the GI Forum worked to combat the discrimination in various sectors like employment, education, and housing. And so through all of this, we just see that the community of Little Mexico is being left to become old and decayed through the younger generation just choosing to move away. And so what is left is the community that is still there, that is fighting to hold on to their community as the first generation of residents. Even though they're aging, they still want to enjoy the close-knit neighborhood that they've all always been a part of. So despite the warm and inviting demeanor of the first generation of residents, there were many internal problems within the neighborhood that no longer served in anybody's favor, like the state of the inner city schools. These schools were old, and some would argue that they never served the area well in the beginning of their formation. The current state of the schools proved to be unsatisfactory for the standards for many of the Mexican-American families in the barrio of Little Mexico, and this just provided another reason for a lot of families to move away. The demise of the community continued on into the 1960s through the introduction of two major transportation projects known as the North Central Expressway and the Dallas North Tollway. They both bordered the community on the eastern edge of the barrio and the neighborhood's western boundary. These projects began what is known as the physical dismantling of the barrio of Little Mexico because they limited the growth that the barrio could experience both physically and economically. In the 1980s and 1990s saw the development of land for office space and high-end residence near the downtown area where the barrio was located. The end of the 20th century marked the demise of the barrio as only a very limited amount of Little Mexico remained in their homes and very few businesses remained in the area. This is a picture of one of the last owners of a business in Little Mexico. His name is Charlie Villasana. He was a store clerk that remained in the community of Little Mexico until his last dying breath in 2018. But his goal for the community was always to continue to expand the culture and for the culture to continue as a legacy. Unfortunately, Charlie's was one of the last surviving business owners in the community who was born and raised in this community. But we do see his dream live on through the culture of the surrounding areas and any of the surviving members telling their families. There is not a Dallas resident that lives in downtown Dallas that does not see the impact of what this community meant for the Mexican Americans in the area. The end of the 20th century marked the demise of the barrio as only a very limited amount of Little Mexico remained in their homes and very few businesses remained in the area. The lasting impact of present-day Little Mexico is no longer evident in the physical state of the barrio, but it is evident in the memory of many Mexican-American residents of Dallas. The continued growth of the Hispanic community because of the neighborhood, like Little Mexico, are the true lasting legacy of the barrio. Based on the extensive analysis of the barrio of Little Mexico, the barrio can be classified as a discontinuous community. All semester long, I have learned how to identify a discontinuous community that can be classified as being a community where Hispanics were once. The demise of the community. The end of the 20th century marked the demise of the barrio as only a very limited amount of Little Mexico remained in their homes and very few businesses remained in the area. The lasting impact of present-day Little Mexico is no longer evident in the physical state of the barrio, but it is evident in the memory of many Mexican-American residents of Dallas. The continued growth of the Hispanic community because of the neighborhood, like Little Mexico, are the true lasting legacy of the barrio. Based on the extensive analysis of the barrio of Little Mexico, the barrio can be classified as a discontinuous community. All semester long, I have learned how to identify a discontinuous community that can be classified as being a community where Hispanics were once the dominant population, but then chiefly non-Hispanic Anglo-Americans later came to control the social space. These communities include the city of Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. Efforts to cosmetically improve the physical state of the barrio of Little Mexico usher in the idea of gentrification, and the sentiment of the community to maintain the barrio as belonging to them quickly proves to be not enough to suppress the plight of gentrification and assimilation into the surrounding areas. And assimilation can be seen in the people of Little Mexico when they returned to the barrio after fighting in World War II. They are now regarded as true Americans with access to American opportunities and American culture that proves to be much more attractive to the younger generation. Through history and literature that has been provided through this class, there is a pattern in which economic boom can either be beneficial for the city, dependent on many factors, or it can be proven to be detrimental, dependent on many factors. In the case of the barrio of Little Mexico, the economic boom that occurred in the community pushed out the Mexican culture. Some cities like Las Vegas are able to preserve their plazas through the economic booms and continue to use them as plazas that function for social gathering to accommodate community-based events. The main plaza of Little Mexico, known as Pike Park, maintains a metal gazebo with a plaque that recounts the history of the park as being the main cultural gathering spot for the barrio, despite it no longer hosting such events. Unlike the community of Las Vegas, Little Mexico has little to offer the new generation of rising residents. The preservation of the community began and ended with the embracing of culture that was deeply rooted in the Mexican-American families of the barrio. In the end, it proved to not be enough. Communities like Little Mexico continue to tell the story of Mexican American urbanization in America and have an impact on the legacy that reveals so much about the history of a country that Mexican Americans have fought to be a part of since the birth of America. The legacy of Little Mexico reveals a story to not only learn from as we continue to preserve Mexican culture, but to treasure the story of so many individuals that came before us to build the foundation that we now proudly stand on.